Load development for the 7.7 Japanese Arisaka rifle. Now, I've already done this before, but because of the ammunition reloading component shortage, I purchased a bunch of bullets and brass because people asked for a load, and I cannot get the powder that I already developed that has a real nice load for the 174 grain bullet. So now, for me to do this, I have to substitute the powder, and it's a little bit faster burning powder. It's more suited for the 150 grain bullet, not so much 174. So I'm going to go and have to develop a load. Now, what I do when I develop any load, and a lot of the ammunition you guys get from me, this is the technique that I use. You get the powder, the bullet and everything, and now we're going to have to develop it to get the most accurate thing. And what I do is take my notebook, start putting down the information, brass, primers, all the other stuff, the caliber, and the powder I'm using. Each powder is a different page, or if I change the bullet, different setup. I go from what the reloading manual says is a start to the max. And I go in half grain increments. Okay, so this is going to take, and I do 5 rounds at each charge across the chronograph. So this, to take this, would be, if I did it all, it'd be 45 rounds. I'd have to expend 45 rounds to run the distance there. But in my experience from this reloading manual, I've found that the maximum charge very rarely is the most accurate. It's usually a grain or a half grain under. So I'm not going to go to the max. I'm going to run it from the start to a half grain to the max and see what I get. Now, what I do is set up my powder measure, and I set the measure to throw light. So I go, throw my charge, place the charge in the pan, put the pan there. It's a bit light, then I trickle it. Until I get it exactly for the charge weight. And I keep all 5 of them, well within 1/10 of a grain. Put it in there. Then to the next one. And this is what I'm going to do for all 45 rounds. Okay? And I'll have the camera, hopefully I'll get out tomorrow, get to the range, and we'll go on to the next level of the development. Alright, and once we have all our powder charges where we want them, the next step is just standard reloading. I seat the bullets. These do have a crimp groove, so I'm going to seat them up to the top of the crimp groove. And then I will use the die to crimp them in the second operation. I always crimp separately, and I like crimping the military ammo. It seems to work out, and then I just usually crimp anyway. I seem to get better results that way. Okay, the next step in our ammunition development, we have a target at 50 yards, a chronograph. We have the ammunition, the rifle. It's all set. I have, for each 5 rounds, I have an individual target set and ready. I will shoot the 40 rounds, 5 rounds at a time, at each target. I will get the chronograph information, and also the paper target is a record of how accurate the gun is, or accurate the ammo is. So let's get started. After our range session, I have to come back home, take the chronograph, I hook it up to a computer, use the software there to gather up the information and statistics. Then I will go and print out this information, and I go to the garage, staple it to the target that I brought back, and I file these things. This is part of the process. This is where I make the decision with accuracy, velocity, and I try to get the numbers down with the standard deviation. Like this one here, standard deviation is 20. And as you do that in the process, you will see these numbers either get smaller, tighten up, and then I try to compare it to the target. But this is all part of the process when I develop the ammunition that I make for you guys. Okay, now I come to the point where I get my targets out of the 8 or 9 strings. I get the ones that are the best. Now if we go by the chronograph, this has the lowest standard deviation here, and that's our 5-shot group. This one is pretty good. I think has a deviation of 10. That one is 7. Kind of like that better. But then again, this other one here, it is 3 shots with the flyers. And I think that's got a standard deviation of 15. So it's kind of a hard choice between this and this. The deviation isn't off that far, but that looks like somewhat better group. Like I said, that triangle's got 3 in there. So probably I'll think about, and both of them are getting to 2,400 feet per second. This is a few feet over, which is about correct. Okay. I mean, some people load at 2,460, 70 or something. This is like 2,420. But the groups are good. We're not looking for being a speed demon. So I'm going to pick between these two, and that's how I determine my load, and that's how I'm going to do my run coming up here. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up my video on the load development for the 7.7 Japanese Airseika rifle. I just wanted you guys to know what I do, how I go about this. And I do that with every cartridge. It's not a simple process. I just don't read through and find something in a manual, get a velocity for a certain weight bullet, and just load one load and see what it does. I work them up. And the thing about these rifles is, I remember 40 years ago, people wouldn't give these a second glance. I used to buy these for $5 and $10 a piece. It was difficult to get ammo. The only ammo you could get off the shelf was Norma, and the stuff was like $20 a box. So I'd buy the rifle for $10, clean all the dirt, gunk, and rust off of it, have like a brand new gun, but then it would cost me double what I paid for the gun to fire 20 shots. So needless to say, I had a bunch of them, sold them over the years, and kind of never went back to them. But now things have changed, just like Mike B said. For under $500, about $300 is what these go for now. It's a good rifle. I mean, it's a solid gun. It's not fancy. There's no variations. They're pretty plain and common. But I found that they're very accurate. In both of my developments, once I get to a certain spot, it's like 3 or 4 charges. There's, depending on the powder, there's really not that huge of a difference in accuracy. That's where you'd have to go and narrow it down to where you get consistent velocity. They're accurate guns that peep with the little triangle. I think a lot of this in them targets is where I just didn't hold it well or realign the sight again. Plus the rest I was using this monopod lug, and where this sat in the rear was weird, and I'd have to reach over and like push down on the trigger. So probably the load I'm going to pick will get a lot better accuracy if you go and shoot the gun right. But that's how I do it. Kind of a drawn out process. I put a lot of time and effort into this, but whatever I end up producing, okay, that's why I get the results, and you'll find it yourself whenever you pick up any of my stuff. There is a noticeable difference for the time and effort I put into it. All right, thank you, and stay tuned.